welcome back to By Myself But Not Alone. This is the long overdue and final episode of the series. This is episode 35, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Now before we get started, I feel the need to explain something. I just used the term long overdue. This tour ended over 4 years ago, and it's taken this long to get to this final episode. But that's not exactly what I'm referring to. I haven't posted a video up on this channel for over 10 months, and that's a long time. That's a little too long. I believe this is the 4th time throughout this series that I've had to back off and take a little bit of an extended break. The first one was about 3 months, and that seemed shameful. Each time I'd come back and I'd apologize for the things in life that, forced the break, and then we get back to it. This time I could offer quite a long list of things that happened in life that kept me away from the project. My mom got sick and she ended up in the hospital for a couple weeks. It took her a little while to get over that, and then just a couple hours after we hit the road heading for the Buffalo and Pittsburgh shows, she fell and broke her pelvis, putting her back in the hospital. She was in there for a good little stretch that time. When she finally got out and was on the road to recovery, I got really sick for a month or so. Had my sinus problems, my middle and inner ear problems, bronchitis took over. Smoking didn't help that at all. I thought I had a vocal nodule or something because I couldn't really talk much without my voice weakening tremendously. And we all know I can't shut up, so there's that. Then we had the long hours of overtime at work, which finally ended. But due to the vocal weakness issue, I knew that it was going to be quite a while before I'd physically be able to put together another episode, much less the last episode, which I've known for quite some time was going to be a very large project. And the list goes on and on. There's just really no way to get through life without more life happening along the way. Another thing that led to the extended breaks, quite honestly, is that this project turned out to be larger, so much larger than I could have ever imagined it becoming, when I came up with the idea. It didn't take me long to realize that I may have bitten off more than I can chew. In the literal sense and figuratively in regard to this project, when you bite off more than you can chew, there are really only 2 options. You can chew and chew and chew and chew until you get through it, or you can spit it out and walk away. I'm happy and proud to be able to say that the latter was never an option. There were hundreds of times throughout this series where I felt like screaming at the top of my lungs, pulling my hair out, but I never once, not one time, ever thought about quitting. It wasn't a thought, it wasn't an option. And over 4 long years later, here we are. And with the long list of excuses I have and could continue to give you about the reason it's taken so long with my intermittent breaks throughout the series to get to this point, I'm not going to do that. Although I kind of just did that. A couple months ago, it hit me like a ton of bricks what had really been going on the whole time. A few months earlier, January 1st hit, OT at work was cut. I had plenty of time. I was going to get busy and I was going to finish the series once and for all. But every time I sat down to work on it, I would just blank out. I would just sit there and stare at my Microsoft OneNote or my editing program, and I'd do nothing and get nothing done, hours on end. I just couldn't find the inspiration, the internal motivation it would take to get this done. I thought I had come to the realization that I was just really burnt out. This is a long, tedious process to make each episode. And I convinced myself that it was just burnout. And then one day it just occurred to me. It was quite simple. It shouldn't have taken that long to figure it all out. But the reason it's taken me so long to wrap up this series and be done with it is the exact same reason that I didn't go home right after the last show in Grand Rapids, which you'll hear about later in this episode. 27,000 miles behind the wheel, and rather than go home, I just kept driving, because I didn't want the greatest adventure of my life to end. I knew the minute I pulled into the driveway at home and turned my car off, the incredible feeling I was having would turn from now into the greatest memories I could have ever hoped to have. And in this case, this series, the same thing has happened. As much as I've wanted to complete it, as painstaking as it's been at times in my head, in my opinion, in my personal reality, as crazy as it has made me feel at times, and as never-ending as this project has seemed, I've enjoyed every single minute of it. Good, bad, and ugly, and there's a piece of me that just doesn't want this to end. And I know the minute I post this video, it's over. It's yesterday. It'll be the final moment of Metallica's hardwired to self-destruct era as seen through my perspective. I just can't express with words how much these last 7 years have meant to me and the paths that so many of us have gone down together. This might sound ridiculous to some, but the Hardwired era is my absolute favorite from Metallica's entire career. These are the golden years of the biggest band that has ever lived. And to be a fan and to be a part of what's going on, it's just, there are no words to express how good it's been. When I really think about it, it seems a little selfish of me to take that stance. As Robert Frost would say, nothing gold can stay. It's time to move into the next era. I feel like I've been a little too resistant. There's a little bit of an overlap here. The 72 seasons European shows, the first round have already been completed. MetFam is ready and I'm ready with them, so let's get on with it. Let's wrap this up. Episode 35, the grand finale in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So at the end of the last episode, we slept in a little bit, knowing that we had a relatively short trip to Grand Rapids, but we also knew we had to secure a hotel, and we had one final pre-party to make it to that night. So we did what had become standard procedure over the previous 6 months. We found a gas station, we topped off the tank, we located a McDonald's, we got juiced on coffee, and we hit the road. To be honest, I can't remember details from a large portion of that trip, and it's not because it's been 4 years and I've forgotten. A week after I got home, the memory of most of that little drive was a blur. We had been on the road for 2 weeks. I had driven over 3,000 miles. Michelle was getting exhausted too. Svet, on the other hand, was in the back seat. He was a little more well-rested, and he kept us entertained throughout the drive by pointing out things that most people would just drive by without even noticing. His keen eye for random detail everywhere we went was something that Michelle and I had grown to enjoy over the course of our time together. And on this final trip, he was on game, and that really meant a lot because it helped pass the time. I'm pretty sure the overwhelming feeling of exhaustion was less from the previous 2 weeks and more from the previous 6 months. And it was just it all seemed to be coming to a head on that final trip. It was somewhere along that stretch where I crossed the 25,000 mile behind the wheel mark, hitting 34 shows and many, many pre-parties to get us to that point. In the moment, it was really hard to wrap my head around the places I'd been and the things I'd seen, and most importantly, the people I'd met. And when I say in the moment, I don't just mean that moment, I mean any given moment along the tour. It was something that started in Wisconsin, and it just was ever increasing as we went on down the road, every step of the way. It seemed like the greatest dream that we could ever have, and as awesome as it was, there was an element of sadness on that final drive. We had all gotten so used to what we had been doing, the thought of getting back to normal life just seemed very strange and far away. We talked about that for just a little bit on that trip, but Svet in his wisdom suggested that we didn't even think like that. He said, let's just go to Grand Rapids and have a good time, and we'll deal with tomorrow. So that's what we did. We just kept on driving into darkening skies. It looked like Mother Nature might unleash one hell of a storm on us. Michelle pulled up the radar. I started talking about hoping for hail. Then I started talking to the sky. Come on, bring it. Give us what you got. We need hail. We've already dealt with everything else you have to offer. Snow, wind, rain, thunder, lightning, flood, fog, fire. Give it to us. Come on. Excessive heat, excessive cold. Bring it. We need hail. And the next thing you know, the hail started falling, and it was falling pretty hard, so hard that we had to pull off the road. And I just sat there celebrating, kind of like I was a little bit off my rocker. When we got back on the road, Michelle asked me if there was something wrong with me, and I said nothing more wrong with me than is wrong with you. She called me stupid. I called her stupid back, and all of a sudden, Svet in the back seat just started laughing hard. He said, I'm really going to miss this when it's all over. And I looked in the rearview mirror and said, you're going to miss what, the hail? And he said, no, the way you two act when you're with each other. I'm really going to miss this when it's over. I'm going to miss hanging out with you guys. And I said, man, it was your idea. Don't be getting sad on us now. We're heading to Grand Rapids. He agreed but kept on laughing, and we just headed on down the highway. So the weather finally cleared up, and it wasn't too much long after that. We were pulling into our hotel. It was a Days Inn, I believe, and it was the biggest Days Inn I'd ever stayed in. Michelle and Svet went in and got us checked in. I found a parking spot. A couple minutes later, we were heading up to our rooms. It didn't take us long to realize that there were an awful lot of our friends staying in this hotel. Every time we turned around, we were seeing faces we recognized. As we approached our door, I heard a very familiar voice coming from a room across the hall and down a couple. And I normally don't look into people's hotel rooms, even if the door is wide open, but I was 100% certain I knew the voice. So I looked on in, and it was our friend Brandon Sansevera from Cleveland. When Brandon smiled and said, "Hey, Jason and Val," poked their heads around the corner to see who was in their doorway. We talked a little bit. They asked if we were going to the pre-party. We said, of course we were, but we wanted to run out and get something to eat first and maybe find a bottle of Jack Daniels because we knew we were gonna need a celebratory drink after the final show, and we weren't certain of the liquor laws, so we wanted to have one before the show. You never know what time they start selling in random areas around the country. We told them we'd see them down there. We went to our room, got unpacked, got everything settled, we got ready, and we headed out. It didn't take us too long to find our bottle, and with that, we headed down to the party at Stella's Lounge in Grand Rapids. I'm not sure who picked the place, but whoever it was made a really good decision. Something tells me Rob Bradley might have had a little something to do with it, as he was involved in planning a lot of the pre-parties along the tour. But again, whoever it was, you made a really good choice. It was a really cool place. The atmosphere inside was that of an old school bar. The minute I walked in, I felt the late 70s, early 80s vibe. You walked into an area that had some tables. It was kind of like a lobby. 8 or 9 tables, and then it divided into 2 sections. Off to the right, there was a door that led to a larger party room, which wasn't open that night, but they did open it later to let us take a group picture. Then off to the left was the area where everyone was congregating. When you walked into that section, there was a bar that ran the length of the entire section on the left, and on the right, there were just booths all the way down across from the bar. It might not have been the absolute largest crowd when compared to other pre-parties along the way, but it was right up there. The main difference between this crowd and some of the other larger pre-parties along the tour, the number of people that seemed to know each other at the pre-parties was ever increasing. And by the time we had made it here, it just seemed like everybody knew everybody. And it was just it was an incredible environment. It created an incredible vibe for the final party. As I walked through heading towards the back, realizing what I just explained, I was kind of having flashbacks of all the parties I'd been to along the way. I'm not saying a bad thing about any of the pre-parties. Each one of them had its own special significance, characteristics, and vibe. I just wanted to touch on the fact of the evolution of, how well the group collectively knew each other. One thing I remember to this day is the feeling that I had standing there looking down. Now on my left, the booths of tables, because like I said, I turned around, and it occurred to me that if you were to take the people that were in those booths and along the bar and just shuffle them all up, I really don't think that the place would have gotten any quieter. It really had the feeling of a large family gathering. So when you hear this term MetFam, that's become the official name for Metallica fans, it truly is that, Metallica family, where all are welcome, and once exposed, people rarely unidentify themselves from this group, this subculture, this Metallica family. It is quite a special thing, and that night, MetFam was in the house. If you know, you know, and I'm preaching to the choir, but if you don't know, or if you've heard about it but you haven't experienced it firsthand, I strongly urge that you plan to locate and attend a pre-party in whatever city your next Metallica show is in. It doesn't matter where you are on Earth. I can pretty much guarantee that there'll be one or more pre-parties in every city this band plays in for the rest of their days. So do yourself a favor, do everyone else a favor, come out and join us. I'm certain the way the upcoming M72 tour is structured, with 2 shows in every city, that there'll be pre-parties on Thursday nights and in-between parties on Saturday nights. I say upcoming, but I'm referring to North America. It's already happened in Europe. They've already gone through their first set of shows, and there were pre-parties every Thursday night and in-between parties on Saturday night in every city. I've seen lots of pictures, people just doing their thing, having a good time. So again, next time you plan on hitting a Metallica show, please come out and join us. I promise you'll make friends and memories that will last a lifetime. So anyway, as I said earlier, somebody talked somebody into opening the door that was on the right when you walked in the bar, the room that was otherwise closed off, and we all filed in for a large and legendary group photo. On our way back out of the room, I was talking to fellow black ticket holder Brendan Kirby, and I asked if he was ready to have my questions thrown at him. He was absolutely ready, so we headed on outside. The place was just too jumping, and there was too much going on in there. There's no way the background noise would have, allowed me to have any kind of proper interaction with him. To be honest, I had planned on keeping my phone in my pocket and just not messing with it because I was so exhausted. But after talking to Brendan a little bit, I realized that the monster I drank was kicking in, and he was so excited about it. I just couldn't resist. It was the only one I did that night, and I just did one the following day after the show. This one is Brendan, and that one will be Brandon. I'm going to go ahead and show you Brendan's interview right now from the pre-party, and then later on I'll show you Brandon's from after the show.
Who are you and where are you from?
Hey guys, Brendan Kirby from Providence, Rhode Island. BrendanKirby.
All right. How long have you been a Metallica fan?
Oh, in the womb. It goes way back. You know, these guys have meant so much to my life. I remember being about 10 or 11 years old, and they were exploding in popularity, and I was just getting into music, and they've been the ultimate travel companion, the ultimate friend, and the band just means so much to me, and they mean even more to me in different ways as my life continues.
All righty.
I feel like I've been called into questioning. I told you I don't know where I was last night at 11.
That's coming next.
I see a bright light.
Interrogation. We're going to get out the telephone book.
Yeah. All of a sudden, it's an ophthalmology exam.
There you go. So have you seen them live before?
I have. The last show, the Grand Rapids show, will be my 44th time, and then I'm going to see them in Ireland in June, which will be number 45. I know that number is not as high as a lot of the friends that I've met on this tour, but I tell you something, I hope I make it to 100 times, because these guys are the best, and I won't stop seeing them as long as they're playing.
It's not a competition either.
Absolutely.
So
the appropriate answer is not enough.
Can you narrow it down to a single favorite song?
That is next to impossible, but I would have to go with, I think Master of Puppets is I know it's cliche, but I think it's a flawless song. I think it represents the best of Metallica in every which way. A fast thrashing riff. It's also got a slow section that's melodic and beautiful. It's got lyrics that are so identifiable, but all of their songs do, so I love everything. I love the way they're not afraid to take risks creatively or artistically, the way they stay true to their own vision, and they're not afraid to do anything, regardless of what people say. But if I had to pick one song, I think that Master of Puppets is the quintessential and best Metallica song.
Alrighty, good answer. And now, favorite album, is that possible?
You son of a bitch. Lulu. I would have to go with Master, I think. I think it's just from top to bottom, front to back, but I love all their stuff. I love everything. I love Hardwired, Self-Destruct. I think it's a masterpiece. I love Death Magnetic. I told you, I can't decide. Interview over.
All right. Favorite band member, past or present?
The way James's creative ability is something that really strikes a chord with me. His sense of humor, his ability to really dig down deep inside of himself and to not be afraid to share what is inside of him, knowing that will potentially resonate with people and that we can take his lyrics and interpret them in our own way, I think is a gift, a very special gift, and it's one that really aligns with my own personal beliefs in terms of creativity and sharing something that is right in here. So I love Lars. I mean, Kirk's ability, Robert, I love all of them, but the connection I have to James's creativity, I think I would just say I identify most with him and the way he puts himself out there, because I work in a creative field and I know what it's like to share something that's in here. So it's
you called me on that. You read my mind. We come from all walks of life.
Sure do.
What do you mind?
I feel like this is an alien abduction.
Well, we're not done yet.
When's the probe?
Look behind you.
Oh God, I can't even.
Look over there.
I've lost my vision.
Look over there. No, but we come from all walks of life as Metallica fans.
We sure
do you mind
do.
if I ask what you do for a living?
I'm an exotic dancer, and I dabble in burlesque as well. Thank you.
You're going to make some money tonight?
I am a television host. I work in the Providence, Rhode Island market for a daily lifestyle morning television show. And Metallica have been very inspirational to me in my pursuit of staying true to what it is I want to do.
Right.
I always wanted to work in the TV field and broadcasting, and it's not an easy field to break into, but I stuck with it, and there were many days where I was going out on auditions and not getting the job, and Metallica really, I dropped everything I had in my life and I moved out to Los Angeles about 5 years ago. Didn't know a soul out there, but one of the friends I had while I was out there, it didn't matter where I was, what I was doing in my life, I always had Metallica. And so the way that they stayed true to what it is that they do, even though I'm not in the musical field, it made me realize that there was a potential for me to achieve my goal, even though it was in a different lane, if I just stayed true to me and continued to do what it was that I wanted to do. So I love that they're still going. I hope they play forever, and I hope to make it to my 100th show someday.
Right on. What do you think about Jim and Joe?
I think they're great. I was already a massive Jim Brewer fan before, and that is not an easy thing to do, what Jim is doing, to warm up a rock show, a metal crowd, when they're expecting a band to get them going, when the crowd's been drinking a little bit, pre-gaming. I mean, that's not an easy crowd to win over, so I give those guys just an infinite amount of credit, the way that they have fine-tuned the show throughout the tour and kind of tightened it up and they've seen what works here, might not work here, and they've made the show cohesive, and the way they work in tandem together, and that they've involved the crowd, and I think they've done a great job.
Final question, I'll leave you alone.
Then I hope to regain my vision at some point.
Oh, yeah, it's going to kill you. You should be used to this. No, one more and I'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
If the band members themselves should happen to see this at any point in the future, do you have a personal message for any or all of them?
I want them to know that I lost my eyesight and that I've developed severe retinal damage because of this bright
There
light.
we go. You're going to have to sue me on that
All
one.
for Metallica, but how metal is it to go blind in the name of Metallica?
There you
I would
go.
just say thank you guys for the inspiration. Thank you for continuing to follow your own vision. Thank you for continuing to just be awesome and the coolest band ever. And just know that you are continuing to inspire me at 37 as you first did when I discovered you at 11, 12. So keep doing it. Thank you.
So that was that. I learned that night that I'm not the only one that can talk and talk and talk. I had a lot of fun doing it. We headed back inside, grabbed a drink, and I spent quite a bit of time going from table to table, booth to booth, just trying to get in a little short visit with as many people as I possibly could. There were a lot of members of the stage crew there, and it's always just really cool to be able to talk to those guys. After all, they're the ones that really make it happen. It was a great night filled with friends and fun. It got late quick, and although it was one of those nights you just didn't want to end, we decided we better head back to the hotel. So we said our goodbyes, and as it turned out, it was a good thing we left when we did. I was doing some crazy stuff behind the wheel, and it wasn't because I had 2 drinks. I had those early in the night and the effects had worn off. It was just due to the fact that I was completely exhausted. I felt delirious, and I could only hope beyond hope that I was going to be able to make it through the final show. Worst case scenarios just flooded my mind, but soon enough we were back at the hotel, and it didn't take long and we were out like lights. The next morning when we woke up, I felt like death. Underneath the feeling of exhaustion was relief because we had actually made it, but combined with the relief was anxiety because we hadn't gotten through the day yet. What if the car broke down, or if I wrecked on the way to the show? What if I just fell out and ended up in the hospital? The thoughts of all the things that could go wrong to prevent me from making it would just flood into my mind, and then I'd have to calm that down by focusing on the relief in the fact that we had made it this far. I'd calm down for a little bit, and then it would creep into my mind how much worse it would be to have made it that far and still not finished. It was really a horrible back and forth that went on that morning, but I'm pretty sure that it was a subconscious effort to avoid thinking about the one thing that I did not want to be thinking about, and that was having to put that damn suit on. When I finally realized that and acknowledged that this was the day of the suit, there was really only one thing that would save me in that moment, and that was coffee. I got up and realized that Michelle was already up and about. I noticed that she left me a cup of coffee on the nightstand. I slammed that one. I headed out the door, heading for the old cafeteria to get more. She was getting off the elevator when I got on. I headed straight for the breakfast area where I drank more coffee than I probably should have. While I was there, I ran into so many people that I knew, and most of them were much further into their day than I was. Michelle shot me a message, and I knew that if I didn't get upstairs and get ready, I was never going to hear the end of it. By the time I made it up to the room, I realized that she and Svet were already ready. That was normally the case. So rather than adding any more stress to what I was already feeling, I decided that I would run them down to the arena, drop them off, and come back where I could get ready in peace. So that's what we did. We had done it that way more than once on the tour because it always took me longer to get to sleep at night, and it was harder for me to get up in the morning. So it was a rather appropriate way to begin our final show day, and I did not mind one bit. Michelle had her purple dress, which was odd to see her in, and Svet had on one of my favorite outfits from the Black Ticket Black Tie event. It looked like something a pirate would wear. It was, the jacket with the big fluffy white ruffles. And on the back, I had given him an And Justice for All. That's his favorite album. I gave him a back patch, and he had sewn it on, and he had his Black Ticket patch. And he really put some work into his outfit, and it was comical, but I really loved seeing him in it. As cool as that was, it didn't calm my nerves one bit while we were heading on down. It was about a half-hour round trip that went smoothly as driving goes, but the suit anxiety continued to build. And by the time I made it back to the hotel, it really kicked in. Now, I do not know how to explain to you what wearing a suit does to me. I can't think of another thing in my life that has made me more uncomfortable, and I'm really not sure why. I hadn't done it since 8th grade graduation in my entire life. I have never imagined a situation that would put me in one again, and here I was about to attend my 35th Metallica show on the tour. 35 for 35. While wearing one, I still had time to back out, and with every step I was more and more certain that that would be the outcome. I figured I'd just apologize to everyone who was all dressed up. I didn't think anybody would take it that seriously. Nobody was really going to get mad. But then again, I couldn't imagine being comfortable in deciding not to participate with the coolest group of people I had ever met in an event that was designed to celebrate our final time together. The Black Ticket, Black Tie event was going to be ironic in that we would all be together in a way that we'd never been together before, and in a way that was really nothing like the typical appearance of fans at a Metallica show. And in the midst of the irony, nobody was really going to give a shit because we were all still the same people. It was a pretty cool way to end the tour and put our own little twist on the final show. I was torn by the time I made it back to the room. Honestly, I was so worked up about it, I was having trouble breathing, and I felt like I was about to pass out. It was a massive anxiety overload, but I had made it back to the room. I closed the door, I went over and sat on the bed and tried to think of anything I could to stop thinking about passing out and not being able to breathe. Just when I thought it was lights out, the phone rang. I was pretty sure I knew who it was, and when I answered the phone, I found out I was right. It was my friend Jeff. You may remember him from the first episode in Madison. He's a school principal now, so his schedule would not allow him to do anywhere near the number of shows he would have liked to have done on the tour. He was in Grand Rapids because he opted to do what he called the hardwired bookends, and that would be the first and last show. He asked me what I was doing. I told him I had already taken Michelle and Svet down to the arena, and I came back to the hotel to freak out a bit before heading back down myself. He laughed and said, "The suit." He knows me very well, and he knew that whole suit thing had been bothering me all along, and he was pretty certain that when he talked to me that I'd be flipping out that morning. So he gave me a 5-minute pep talk, little rant that seemingly made sense, at least enough to calm me down a little bit. He said he was heading down to the arena, and when I got down there, I should give him a call, and the last thing I remember hearing him say was, "This is it, boy. You did what you set out to do. Just suck it up and do it. You'll be fine. Give me a call when you get down there," and he hung up the phone. It's funny how some things seem like a complete blur while other things seem so vivid, and I'm certain that's got to do with the level of emotion evoked by specific things. Anyway, I sat there on the bed a little while longer before I stood up to face the inevitable. I went in the bathroom to splash some water on my face, and that really kind of woke me up because it was so cold. I just stood there for what seemed like a very long time, and everything around me just kind of seemed to fade away. All the racing thoughts that had been kicking my ass that morning were no longer present in that little timeless window. It felt peaceful, it felt really good, and I did not want it to end. There we were, my old friend and I stood staring at each other with 2 sinks between us. Everything else was gone. Normally these conversations between me and my friend were pretty one-sided. I'd be talking a mile a minute, and he's a smart ass. He'd sit over there mimicking my every word and movement. But this time it was different. He gave me something I really needed in that moment. He offered me the words of my favorite poem, If, by Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those 2 impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Now, I'm not trying to turn this into MetfanMike's Poetry Hour, but even if I was, it wouldn't be too far from what most of us are really into anyway. Songs are nothing more than poetry with background music, and if you want to take it a step further, the music alone can be viewed as poetry of instruments. But anyway, I'm sharing this with you because that's what happened to me in the hotel that day. And when the final line was complete, we just stood there and I thought about the words I had just heard. I knew them well and I had for a long time, but standing there in the silence, a form of revelation occurred. There was a newness that excited me because I was in a situation unlike any situation I've ever been in before, the Black Ticket experience, where I could actually draw inspiration from part of this great work. Those final lines. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. I couldn't help but think of my mother. This poem offers 32 lines that are truly words to live by, and I can't think of another piece of literature that offers such a comprehensive parental guide, if you will. I believe if you have children and by the end of your days you've exposed and ingrained half of these values into them before you leave Earth, you've done a fine job as a parent. I have two brothers, Jeff and Kevin. Jeff's the oldest, very level-headed. He knows what he wants and he goes out and gets it. Kevin's the youngest. He's level-headed too, but he's got a little wild side in him. He's like a combination of the two of us, and then I'm the middle trouble child. There's 3 years between Jeff and Kevin. So pow, 1, 2, 3, my mom had her hands full. She single-handedly raised the three of us, and in the process of doing so, she exposed us to 100% of the values touched on in this poem. She never read this to us. She never made us read it to her. She never offered little rewards, as she often did, for participation in games that were designed to teach us something when we weren't old enough to realize that we were actually learning. We just thought we were playing games. She didn't expose us to Kipling's brilliance in the form of the poem itself. I don't know if she even knows this poem. I don't know if she's read it herself. Something tells me that she's probably encountered it somewhere along the way. She taught us these values by example. She lived them right before our eyes. I can literally pick it apart line by line and think of one or more examples that I saw in my life that are directly applicable to how she handled the many obstacles that were in her way, temporarily. She always found a way to get through them. I stood in that bathroom and thought of all the times I started something and didn't finish due to boredom and or lack of passion in the pursuit. I had given her countless reasons to throw in the towel and just accept the fact that the middle child is probably a little trouble and he's just never quite gonna get it. But she was at home cheering louder than anyone for completion of my goal. She's been the absolute biggest fan of my YouTube channel. She loves hearing about the adventures. She's a big fan of what she calls the Metallica people. And I'm not talking super hardcore mama's boy that's taking every step that's being dictated by the mom. What I mean is if I accomplish my goal for me because I deserve the feeling of accomplishment, she in turn would have accomplished her goal of instilling in me the fact that you never give up. You should always continue to chase your dreams. Don't ever quit, and you will win. And all those good thoughts. I made up my mind in that moment that this was going to be the one time that I didn't rebel. This time I was just going to go with the flow. I was going to be part of the group's celebratory event. I was just going to let whatever happened happen. So I took a shower and I put the suit on. Real quick, I'm going to jump back before moving forward. Something about this poem that I should have mentioned but didn't. Although Kipling wrote this for his son and it definitely has the father-to-son perspective, it's really gender neutral. In our case, it was mother to sons. I know women who were raised by good fathers. There are people that were raised by both parents, by grandparents, by aunts, uncles, family friends, friends that became family over time. I used the term parental guide loosely a few minutes ago, and I just wanted to clarify a little bit. You know, of course you have two parents. Everyone's got two. So when I say parental guide, I'm referring to anyone who had a profound influence on you in the formative years and then throughout your life. If I seem like I'm procrastinating, I am. I'm trying to distract myself from wondering what I'm doing here in this thing, so let's get back to it. I stood there looking at the shaved ape before me. I just kind of stared at him for a couple minutes, and I ended up just shaking my head at the thought of what I was about to do, and we had our final exchange of words. I looked right at him and said, "This is your unforgiving minute. Run, boy, run." And it was at this point I realized the dumbass didn't have his tie on. Oh man, the tie. I didn't know how to tie it and Svet was gone. I don't know how I thought all along that I'd ever be able to figure it out. I didn't give it a heck of a lot of thought. But anytime it crossed my mind, I just told myself I'd get Svet to do it. Right as I felt that panic starting to rush back in, a light bulb went off in my head. Val, Jason, Brandon, I wonder if they're still here. They're just 2 doors down across the hall. I shot one of them a text and I got an immediate response that said they were still down in the room. So I called Val and I asked if I could come down and get some help. And she said, "Of course you can. What's going on? Are you okay?" I said, "Well, I'll explain when I get there." A few minutes later, I was knocking on their door. I must have looked like I had seen a ghost or was about to pass out because when Val opened the door, she said, "Man, you don't look good. Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. I've been freaking out all morning about wearing this damn suit, and there's really no way I can explain to you the level of what's going on in my head. But with all that going on top of everything, I don't know how to tie a tie. Can one of you guys tie this tie for me?" Although they might not have been able to totally understand, they all sensed the urgency, and one by one they said things that were sincere and very supportive. Jason tied the tie in the mirror and he left it loose, and then Val took it and put it on me, pulled it tight, straightened it. Each one of them further reassured me that everything was going to be fine. That's something that I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. It really made me feel better in that moment. I said, "I'm going to get on out of here." They said they'd see me down at the show. I got a double dose of what I call Canadian kisses from Val, one on each cheek. That's how she always does it. And I was on my way. As I made it to the elevator and then out to the car, I remember walking along thinking how much better they had made me feel and how grateful I was for that. I also remember thinking that if it wouldn't have been them, it could have been one of hundreds of other people that I had met in the past 6 months. I couldn't think of any of my new friends that wouldn't have helped me as they had, and I just felt so grateful for that as I headed down to the arena. It was going to be okay. I was still nervous, but it was very manageable, and everything was going to be all right. Oh, and real quick, I want to say Val, Jason, and Brandon aren't here, so unfortunately, I still don't know how to tie a tie. And so before I taped this, I had to jump on YouTube, and if that's not right, it's what you get. The trip to Van Andel Arena took no time at all. This would have been the one time on the tour where it would have been fine with me if it would have taken hours to get there, but it didn't. Even the parking was way too easy. I pulled into the first lot that I saw. I figured it was so close to the building it would probably be full. Pulled my little ticket, the gate raised. As soon as I pulled in, there was one last empty spot. It looked like the rest of the lot was entirely packed, so I think I got the last spot. But it looked like fate was not going to assist in any further procrastination. So I grabbed my smokes, my little black book, a bottle of water, and a stack of black ticket patches, and I headed up to where I had dropped Svet and Michelle off earlier that day. I took quite a few of the patches with me because I knew of several people that were certainly going to meet me there, and I told them I'd get them at the last show, and I had no idea who I'd see that I hadn't seen, but then there was the band. I wasn't entirely sure how at that moment, but I still had hope that I'd be able to get the band's patches to them. That was part of the original plan when we had the patches made, and I still felt like I had a good shot of making that happen before the day was over. I just didn't know how. I walked up a road that led directly to the arena. I could see the wall of the arena from my parking spot, but I couldn't see much else. But with every step I took towards the building, the anxiety grew. And I finally made it up to the corner where the road teed in to the road that separated the arena and the 2 blocks on either side. I peeked around the corner to see if there was any action, and I didn't see a lot going on. I was expecting to see large groups of people congregating and walking around freely, and I could hopefully slide in unnoticed, but that's not what happened. I did see quite a few people, but they were all kind of bundled up and sitting under a recessed covered area of one of the entrances. I didn't see one sign of suits or dresses because, like I said, most people were sitting down and they had big coats and a lot of them had blankets on. It was kind of cold that morning, so it all made sense, but it didn't help me relax one bit. I called Jeff to see where he was. He was around the building in the normal GA line. I told him where I was, and he said he'd be right over. He wasn't joking, and it took him no time to get there. I peeked around the corner, and I saw him walking past where the black ticket holders were congregating. He was walking fast. He shot across the street and came right around the corner I was hiding behind. He had the biggest grin on his face, and I knew that everything he was going to say to me would be coupled with little bursts of laughter in between the words, and I was not wrong. Ooh, look at you, Mr. Suit. Pretty sharp, if I do say so myself. I told him to fuck off. He kept laughing. He said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But I'm not laughing at you. You look good. Man, you look really good. What I'm laughing at is you're the first person I've seen today that looks anything like you do. Nobody up there's got suits and dresses on. They got you, boy. They set you up and it worked. With that, I said, fuck this, I am out. And I headed back to the parking lot, and I could hear him saying, calm down, I'm kidding, chill out. Can't you see I'm enjoying myself? You'd do the exact same thing if it were me. I stopped. I asked him if he was trying to kill me, and he said, look, here come some more people. And I turned and looked, and it was Joe Pasella, and Joe had a suit on. It was Joe and somebody else. I can't for the life of me remember who it was. And again, I've said this a couple times already. It wasn't because it's been 4 years. I couldn't remember the next day who was with Joe. It might have been Aaron Ginther, but I just can't be sure. So Joe walked up and we talked for a little bit. I told him how Jeff had been messing with me. He reassured me that he had seen plenty of people that day, and he said, you're going to fit right in. Everybody's pretty well dressed up. We talked a little more, and then they left us right where they had found us. Jeff and I stood there in silence for a few minutes until he spoke up. He said, relax, boy. Everything's going to be okay. But let me ask you one question. Who are those people? And with that, I had a full-blown 25-year flashback. I knew exactly what he meant. There was no explanation necessary. But there's no way you could possibly know what he meant, so I think I better give you a quick one. Over the years, Jeff and I have seen Metallica together many times, probably 20 at least. Maybe, actually, it's probably a few more than that. And a lot of those shows were in the 90s. Sometimes they were planned, but quite often they weren't. We just one or the other, hey, Metallica's in Chicago or Indy or KC, let's roll. And, a couple hours later, we were on the road. We'd usually intentionally leave as early as we possibly could so we'd have plenty of time to hang out in parking lots and the long lines on the day of the show. And while we were doing this, we would do some hardcore people watching. We'd meet someone, talk to them in passing real quick, and then, once we'd gone our separate ways, we'd further the discussion about that person we had just talked to. Whether or not they had kids, what they did for a living, if they were married, the things that give people character, the things that make people who they are. A lot of times it was after talking to someone for a few minutes, but a lot of times it wasn't, we didn't even talk to them at all. We'd just catch them walking by. We weren't trying to judge anyone negatively or assume anything with any level of assuredness. It was just a way we spent a lot of time. And it was pretty entertaining, and quite often it got a little crazy under the influences of specific substances that I won't mention now. Regardless of what we would ever come to, the conclusion we would come to about any specific individual, one or the other would throw out his guess of who that person could possibly be in their life outside of this Metallica scene. But the other one would always close it up with, he's Metallica or she's Metallica. It was a fun way of passing time, but it was also a way for us to repeatedly state the obvious, that these people come from all walks of life. The variance in this crowd is off the chart. But as soon as the lights went down and the band came on, none of that would matter. Common interest would take over, and the party would be on. And it was just a very special place to be, and we did this often. So when Jeff asked me, who are these people? I knew that he was referring to our past, but I really wasn't expecting what came next. More than likely because I was feeling so rough, but for whatever the reason, it really caught me off guard when I heard it. He said it the first time, and then he said it again, and he said it matter-of-factly, very calm. There was no urgency to yell to make sure that I heard what he said. Who are these people? Back in the day, we didn't have any clue. We had a great time doing it, and it sure helped us pass the time, but we had no idea who those people really were. We got to know some of them, but this time, you know who those people are. You set out to do something pretty big, and I know you weren't sure you were going to make it, but I never doubted you for a minute, and there's a good group of people that never doubted you for a minute. We all knew you were going to do it, and here we are at the last show. Who are those people? Those people are Metallica. So suck up your suit issues, because nobody really gives a shit about that. Get over there and do your thing. Come on, Skippy, I'll walk with you. He headed towards the group, and all I could say was, I hate it when you're right, and I caught up to him. When we got up to where everyone was, I stopped. He just kept on walking. He turned around and said, I'll catch you inside. Good luck. And he disappeared around the building. There was a pretty large group of people in the little cupboard area in front of some doors that we obviously weren't going to be going in. That was around the corner. But a couple people jumped up and came over and started talking to me, and then all of a sudden people started walking up from the left and from the right. It kind of turned into what I was hoping to see when I first peeked around that corner. The initial shock of appearing in a suit didn't last long, which kind of surprised me, but it just didn't seem any different than it had at the other shows, because so many people were showing up all dressed up. Nobody really cared in a bad way at all. It was quite a bit of fun because we all started taking pictures. So I spent an hour or so walking around trying to get to say hey to everyone, and really take advantage of the final day with these people that I had met over the past 6 months. That's what everyone was doing, and there was a very somber feeling that day. It was like every person there knew that the end of something very special was upon us, but nobody wanted to talk about it. Everybody wanted to take full advantage of the final day together. It was kind of like Svet's idea on our little small 3-man scale. Everyone seemed to be taking that approach on the day because the day wasn't over yet, and we all knew that. Someone came up and told me that Matt from CID was looking for me and pointed over to where he was standing. In case you don't remember, CID is the promotional outfit that they oversaw the whole black ticket thing, and Matt was pretty much the boss on scene. He had a boss or two above him, but as far as the everyday on the scene, we all kind of looked at Matt like the guy that made it all possible. And it's really kind of amazing how well coordinated the whole thing ended up being throughout the course of the tour. Anyway, I looked over at him. We made eye contact while he was stepping in my direction, and he asked me if he could talk to me for a minute, so we stepped away from the crowd. Once we were a good distance away from everyone, he said, okay, here's what's happening. We're upgrading you to the Whiplash experience. You may remember from the Cincinnati episode, that's where my friend John Bidwell added me as his +1. We got to go into the Memory Remains Museum and see all the cool stuff from the band's collection. Matt asked me if I had gotten to see all that stuff, and then when I told him that John had made me his +1, he did remember. He looked right at me. I was smiling real big with the news, and he said, you know what? I'm not even going to do it this way. You're a pretty straightforward person, and I'm going to return that. You're not being upgraded to the Whiplash experience. You're being upgraded to the Hardwired experience. With that, he pulled out the Hardwired wristband and put it on my wrist. I really wasn't certain of the package name, so I said, is this the one where I'm going to get to meet the band? He smiled real big and said, this is the one where the band gets to meet you and the other guy. It was their idea. When he referred to the other guy, he called him by name, and I knew who he meant because I met him a couple times, but I'm not going to mention his name, but I do feel the need to explain something. I've met a lot of people that refer to me as the guy that did all the shows on the North American Black Ticket Tour, and that's true, but it's really only half a truth. There was another guy who did it, and he was on a completely different agenda. He's an incredibly low-profile guy. I ran into him at the S&M show, and I asked him if he'd mind if I tell a little bit about his story when we hit the 35th episode. And he said he'd just rather not do that. And he asked me not to even use his name, and I 100% respect his wishes.
I just want you to know that I'm not the only one. There were two of us. So in my explanation of what happened backstage, if you hear me mention old boy or old dude or other dude, that's who I'm talking about. At this point, Matt said he had to run and finish up some duties with the CID crew. He said if I had any pending business to wrap up with any of the black ticket holders to go ahead and take care of that, and then we'd meet back right there in a half hour. As he walked away, I could just feel the adrenaline rushing through me, and it was doing the job that the coffee had failed to do. I drank quite a bit, but it just wasn't cutting it. This news was big news. Of course, I was elated that I was going to get to see the guys again, hang out with them, talk to them. But what made Matt's news so fulfilling was that I was going to actually get to place one of our original black ticket roamer patches in each of their hands. I know I've said it a couple times, I'm saying it once more. That had been in the back of my mind since I placed the original order. It was a lesser goal within a larger goal, but a goal nonetheless. I had had numerous opportunities and offers from people who had secured meet and greets throughout the tour. Each time that came up, I thanked them for the offer, but I said, I think I'm going to be able to take care of this before the tour is over. And again, I didn't know how, but I just had a feeling. I could only think of one loose end that needed to be tied up before I rejoined Matt for the next adventure, and that was to find Michelle. It didn't take long. I hit the crowd asking people, have you seen Michelle? Have you seen Michelle? And each time I said that, they pointed in the same direction. I must have been, right behind her, and I finally caught up to her. I pulled her aside. I told her what was up. After the show, my friend Jeff gave me this picture that he took of me and Michelle having our little conversation. I had no idea that he took the picture, but it was pretty cool to get it. So I told her what was up. I said, give me your black ticket. And she said, why? And I said, well, if I get the chance, don't count on it, but if I get the chance, I'll have them sign it. She said, what about yours? They're not going to sign everything you pull out. And I said, why do you have to be so difficult? Just give me your damn black ticket. I'd much rather see their signatures on yours than on mine. I know what it would mean to you. Is that okay? But no guarantees. Like I said, if I get the chance, I'll do it, but who knows? I might start running my mouth and forget all about you. It could happen. She said, if you lose this, I'm going to axe murder you. You're the only person I would trust this with. She guarded it like it was made of gold the entire tour. She handed it to me, smiled, and said, good luck. I said, I'll see you inside, and I headed over to where I was meeting Matt. He made it back to our spot exactly as I did, and he told me we had to go meet the other dude. We found him next to a staff-only entrance. Matt told us to sit tight. He was going to go and check on the status of what was going on. This was pretty good timing because I looked over and saw the one black ticket holder that I'd kind of been keeping my eyes peeled for, Matt Zimmerman. He hadn't done his black ticket intro yet. I told him what was going on, so he did a quick intro, and off he went. I got to go over and hang out and catch up with old dude for a few minutes before Matt came and took me in a different direction. Dude had planned a hardwired experience before he knew what was happening, so he had to go with that group. Matt and I went in the door we were standing in front of. He introduced me to a few of the CID workers. They gave me a goodie bag, sent me around to the merch booth to pick up my t-shirt. I gave that one to my brother Kevin. We came on back in the hall down the opposite direction of where I'd just come from was the Memory Remains Museum. Matt told me to go on in and have a drink or two, maybe get something to eat, check out the memorabilia, and he'd be back in 20 minutes or so. I'm really glad I did that because I saw quite a few things that I hadn't seen in Cincinnati. That night, I had a couple drinks, Jack and water. I didn't get anything to eat, but the drinks relaxed me. I was having an adrenaline overload. Wasn't too much longer, and I saw Matt over in the doorway waving me over. When I got there, he said it's just about time. He was back and forth with someone on the radio, and in that moment, the plans were changed. He said, now we have to kill a little more time, and he explained to me how chaotic it can be to do all the things that the band and the crew have to do, all the pre-show stuff. We saw two empty chairs sitting right outside the glass wall, so we headed out there and had a seat and a couple smokes. We spent a good deal of time talking about the black ticket experience as a whole, and then we broke it down into some smaller elements. He asked me if there was anything I would change about the black ticket, and I could only think of one, and I'm not going to get into that one. It was no big deal, but he did appreciate the insight. He asked me about my family, and he told me a little about his. He asked me about my job. He thought it was really cool that they cooperated on the level that they had cooperated so that I could, get the most out of my black ticket experience. We had some good conversation that day, and I really felt like I got to know him a little better, and I think he felt the same way. Before I knew it, Matt got another radio call, and we headed on in. We went down a hallway, and when we got to the backstage door, that's where the other dude was. We met him, but another guy came out, and he said, there's been another change of plans. Matt apologized profusely. I just kind of laughed and I said, man, these are good problems to have. Don't worry about it. So we got to talk a little longer. He asked me if I was nervous, and I explained to him that I wasn't really at all nervous. I was just really anxious. It wasn't too much longer, and a guy came out and got us and took us on back. We went down a little hallway, and then it opened out into another room. When I got there, I saw Paula from Sweden. She asked me what I was doing back there, so I told her. She was really excited for me. Then she told me what she was still doing back there. Somehow Kirk missed her in the rotation of, the hardwired package. You get to talk to each band member for a few minutes. And somehow Kirk had missed her, so he was on his way back to make good on it. I was talking to old boy while we waited, and a few minutes later I looked over and I saw Paula and Kirk talking. They hung out there for 5 minutes or so, and then I saw her disappear around the corner, and I didn't really see where Kirk went. From where I was standing, I could pretty much see down the length of the hall that they brought us in, so I knew it wouldn't be long, and I'd see him walking in, and it wasn't much longer, and that's exactly what happened. If memory serves me correctly, Kirk came in first in his Snoopy shirt. He walked up and shook my hand and stepped to my left. Rob and James came on in, shook my hand, and they stepped over in front of Dude. Finally, Lars walked in. He walked right up to me with his head tilted. You know how he does it? He said, Mike Mueller, the mysterious black ticket roamer. And my response was, no mystery here, Lars. I'm all over this fucker. And of course, by that I meant United States and Canada. He shook my hand and he settled back next to Kirk. So it was me and Dude standing with our backs to the wall. And we each had two of them in front of us. I had Kirk and Lars. Dude had James and Rob. That's how it started, but before it was over, I started running my mouth, and we all ended up in a big giant circle, and it turned out to be like no meet and greet I've ever done. It was really cool. Lars got the conversation rolling. He said he could identify with what, some of the stuff we had been going through, because back in the day, he and his friends would jump in their car and they'd go out and follow bands around. He mentioned Motorhead by name, among others. When he was explaining that, I really got the feeling that he's never forgotten what that was like. He was obviously a teenager when he was doing that, and, quite a few of the black ticket holders were rapidly approaching 50 years old. So there's a little bit of a difference, but I really got the feeling that he had never forgotten what that felt like. He got right to it, and he asked me what was the greatest thing I had seen along the road with my black ticket. I told him as much as I loved the new album, it wasn't the music that made it so great. And I said, obviously it is about the music, because without the music we wouldn't be here. But at this point, the music's secondary, completely secondary. I looked over at Kirk and said, don't get me wrong, but you guys aren't spring chickens anymore, but as the music goes, you're flat out killing it. He seemed to appreciate the comment, said thank you. I said, but there's so much more to it. The meal shares, the ride shares, hanging out with people in long lines for hours at a time, the pre-parties and all the interaction with the other fans, as well as just people in the world getting to and from the shows. But aside from all that, to give a completely honest answer to your question, what's the greatest thing I've seen during the black ticket experience? Well, there was one particular black ticket holder who, in the midst of this fan fantasy, all the things I just mentioned, right in the middle of it, she turned her back multiple times on all of it, flew home on her own dime to help someone. She lived in a small town, and there was a lady in that town who had cancer, and she didn't have anybody to take her to her treatments. So multiple times she would fly home just so she can give this lady a ride. Not only did she give her a ride, she'd stay there for a few days after the treatments, because that's when you really need someone around. Then she'd fly back and rejoin us, and she did this all in the name of helping another person, someone who needed help. And I just don't know that I could have done that. And to me, that's superhuman. Now, I didn't go into it this deep backstage, but I feel less of a need and more of a want to say it here. I pinned her down one time and one time only. After that, I never questioned it. But I said, why are you doing this? You know better than anyone how curious I am about things. I just really want to know, why are you doing this? The lady wasn't family. She wasn't even a close friend. She's more of an acquaintance. But I want to know what motivated you to do this. I knew that I was risking her telling me not to worry about what motivated her, or a dozen other answers that she could have laid out. But she looked right at me with a look that said, I know we talk a lot of shit, but this time I'm going to give you what you want. A bare bones answer. She said, God forbid I ever find myself in a situation like this lady is in. I can only hope that there'll be someone there to help me. I instantly felt the goosebumps as she said that. I have them right now. I just looked at her and said, damn, that's the perfect answer, right on. And we went back to business as usual. Now, I'm not saying this right now, and I didn't bring it up backstage because this person's a good friend of mine. This person's a good friend of mine because I can say these things about her, and there's a big difference. She's going to want to kill me for bringing this up, but that won't be the end of the world because she's got a very long list of reasons she wants to kill me. Wanting to kill each other has been a common interest in our time together. It's been a lot of fun for both of us, and I'd imagine that quite a few of you know who I'm talking about, but for those of you who don't, her name is Michelle. Michelle Chacho. She grew up in Chicago and she ended up in Wisconsin, was fortunate enough to end up with a black ticket. I was fortunate enough to meet her early on the tour. We hit it off immediately. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we're the same age. We started traveling and hitting shows together, and she's pretty much been my ride or die road dog ever since, and it's been a true pleasure. Now, Michelle, you know I hate to say good things about you when you can hear them, but I think you already know what a great friend you are, and I want to say it again. What you did for that lady was nothing short of amazing. I'm pretty certain that if we wouldn't have been traveling together, I would not have known anything about this. And it was truly the greatest thing I saw during the 6 months of our black ticket experience. Now let's get back to the meet and greet. So I finished my little mini rant when Lars asked me that question by saying, at this point, the music is secondary. He looked at me and nodded his head. He smiled and said, I'm so glad you didn't say that time you played Confusion. You get it, man. Seeing and hearing his reaction in that moment made me feel that what we were wrapping up had unfolded in ways that made it as great of an experience for us as they possibly could have hoped for. At this point, I pulled out the patches. I told him how we had collectively come up with the design for it. I told him that I'd been, handing them out along the way. I didn't succeed in my ultimate goal of meeting all 250 black ticket holders, but I hit 200, so I felt pretty good about that result. He really checked it out. He complimented the idea, and he went to hand it back to me. I said, no, I traveled a long way in hopes that I could put one in your hand. I've got one for each of you. I'll never forget watching what happened when I said that. Lars looked over to his left real quick, like a little kid, excited. He said, James, Mike's got gifts. And James stepped over and I handed him one. He said, thank you. I gave Kirk one. I gave Rob one. Lars and I kept going back and forth, and I noticed that James was really taking in the design of the patch. And he just kind of stood there. It looked like, you know how you're standing there reading a book, holding the book, standing up? That's kind of how he was staring at it. And I don't know, it might have been 15 seconds, it might have been 30 seconds, but he stared at the patch for a long time. And he almost seemed to be in another place. And, 15 to 30 seconds, that might not sound like a long time, but in that situation, that's a very long time. I really got the feeling that he had deep admiration for the patch, and he had a deep appreciation for all it stood for. He finally slid it into his back pocket, and this is the point I mentioned earlier where we kind of had transitioned into a circle and I started running my mouth. We just hit random aspects of the black ticket for a few minutes, and then one of the crew members finally suggested that we step over to the logo board backdrop. The first picture we took had all 6 of us, me and old boy and the band, and then we each got our own group photo. After that, we all went back to talking. I was standing right next to Rob, and I couldn't help myself. I just spit it out. I looked at him and said, do you mind if I say something to you? There's something I'd really like to say to you, and I'm kind of worried about risking that it might come out wrong. I don't think it will, but I've just really got something I'd like to say to you. He looked at me with confidence in my ability to say what I needed to say, and he said, you can say anything to me, man. I'm sure it'll be fine. I said, okay, I'm just going to say it. It took me a very long time to accept you with any level of equality as a member of Metallica. It's really not a bad thing about you. It has more to do with the fact of how much I love Jason and all his involvement in the band, the Newstead era. But after watching you play show after show on this tour specifically, I can finally say with complete honesty that they picked the right guy. And I'm sorry it took me this long to figure that out. When he heard that, he gave me a slow nod and a very sincere thank you. Then he kind of caught me off guard and he stepped up with a big hug. And I'm not talking a bro hug. I'm talking about a bear hug. And in that moment, I flashed back to when I interviewed the girls from Australia in Boise, Idaho. When I questioned if they had a favorite band member, Claire told me that Rob was her favorite. And she specifically stressed that he's got those arms like an ox. When we were doing the interview in Idaho, I was really amused by her answer. But I'm here to tell you, Claire, you were not wrong. Rob has the arms of an ox. And when they were wrapped around me, I thought of you. When Lars saw that, he came back over and asked what he was missing. I simplified my answer. I said, I was just telling Rob that it really took me a long time to accept him as an equal member of Metallica, mostly because of how much I love Jason. Lars said, we all love Jason. And I said, yeah, I know that. I really know that. But I was just letting Rob know that it took me a long time to get to this point, but I'm at the point now where I 100% realize that you guys picked the right guy. So you really didn't miss anything. I was just kind of following my own advice. And when I said that, he gave me a very inquisitive look. So before he had to ask, I went ahead and continued. What I mean by that is throughout this tour, there have been quite a few people that had an upcoming meet and greet. And, at some point they'd ask me, what should I say? I don't know what to do. They were just really nervous. And they were kind of, knowing that I've had a couple meet and greets myself, the conversation became that they were unsure of what they wanted to say to you. Anytime the conversation got anywhere near that, I'd offer a little advice and I'd say, don't go in there with anything scripted. It's okay if you have a specific question that you're worried about forgetting and you jot it down with a little reminder. But otherwise, just go in there and be yourself. Let what's going to happen, happen. Whatever you do, don't screw the band out of their meet and greet, because that's what they really want. They want to meet you, and they deserve to meet you. So just go in there and be yourself. You'll be fine. They're just people, some guys in a band. So go in there and treat them like that. There's really nothing to be nervous about. It was like what Matt had told me earlier when I was being upgraded to the package where the band gets to meet me. He wasn't just providing lip service. He knows them well, and he knows how they roll. He said it and he meant it, and hearing it just made me smile because I've known that about them for a long time. Lars looked at me with that big smile on his face, and once again he said, man, you get it, and he reached up and patted me on the arm. I kind of laughed. I thanked Rob and Lars for the opportunity to come back and hang out with them. Kirk came up. He said, shook my hand and said goodbye. I thanked him and he headed away. And then James came up one final time. He shook my hand. I thanked him again. I thanked him for everything that they do, but specifically in this instance, I wanted to say thank you for the black ticket experience that they had provided. And I told him I'm speaking on behalf of anyone involved with it. Thank you so much for what you guys have done. He smiled, thanked me, and headed on down the hall. On the way out, I finally got to meet Stefan from Met Club. We talked a little bit about the black ticket reporting gig. He thanked me for my participation, and I thanked him for the goodie pack that they gave me. We were in correspondence quite a bit through email and text during the first 3 legs, but this was the first time I actually got to meet him, and that was really cool. Matt came in and got us. He took us out through the big doors, but he let us know that we weren't quite done yet. He said that Lars wanted a few more pictures for his Instagram page, so we were going to go back in. We hung out for just a short time, and then we headed back in, and we got a couple more pictures taken with Lars, and it gave me another opportunity to thank him for all he, the band, and the black ticket had given me. It felt really good walking through those doors and back out into the large arena hall. I was walking back into reality, into the place where I felt so comfortable. But this time I did so possessing memories of something that felt truly amazing. I had just spent a half hour or so backstage hanging out with the guys, all of them at once. It was really unlike anything I had ever experienced at this point, and it felt really good. We just kept walking. We were heading back to where we had come in. Matt told us they were going to let us run our stuff out to the car and then re-enter. So when we got up to the table where, I'd met the ladies earlier and they gave me my poster and my gift box, Matt told them what was up, and he just said, make sure you let these guys back in. Old dude headed out the door before me, and as I was following him, I kind of turned back. I was going to, give Matt one final thank you, but he called me back. He said, hey, Mike, come here. I have something to give you before you go back to your car. We only have one of these left. There were 2, and I'm pretty certain the band has the other one, but I think Matt might have even told me that in that moment, but there was so much going on. You have to forgive my little memory lapses. But he placed the black ticket banner in my hands. Now check this thing out. I really don't have room to do this down here, so I don't know how I'm going to show it to you. But this was the banner, one of the 2 that were hanging on poles at each show. When you got there, you had to check in. You had to, find out where your line was. But this was on a pole where the black ticket line was going to be at each show. And this is really going to make for choppy editing, but I really want you to see this thing. It's taller than me. going to make a mess here, and then I'm going to explain. He said he was pretty sure that no one was going to be upset with what he planned to do with it, but he wanted to be certain. So earlier that day, he went out to the covered recessed area where all the black ticket holders were congregating earlier, before I got there. And he said that he had an idea, but he just wanted to make sure no one else had a better idea. And he said when he said that, somebody said, "Give it to Mike." And then someone else said, "Give it to Mike." And he said collectively everyone kind of agreed. When he heard several people say that, he told them that was his original intention. And, he asked if there were any objections, and everyone there agreed that I should have it. I cannot tell you what that meant to me and what it still means to me. It took my breath away for a few seconds. As often as I had seen those flags, I hadn't given 1 ounce of thought as to where they might possibly end up. And hearing him say those words as he gave me one, it quite literally, it just about made me cry. When I told him that, he said, "I completely understand, but you earned it. I'm just happy I'm the one that got to put it in your hands." And no time to get emotional now. I think they're planning a group photo down by the soundboard, so go on and get out of here. Hurry back. I think you've got about 20 minutes. With that, I headed out the door. My adrenaline was through the roof. I was walking really fast. I wasn't even trying to absorb all of what had just happened to me. I was just happy. I was so happy on that trip to the car. I made it in about 2 minutes, and it wasn't until I reached in my pocket to grab the keys that I realized what had happened. I felt Michelle's black ticket, and I knew that I had done exactly what I warned her could happen, although when I told her that, I really had no intention of that happening. I was pretty certain I was going to be able to get her black ticket signed. I had every intention of making that happen, and I just pictured the look on her face when I put it in her hand. Once everything started happening, I completely forgot about her. I couldn't imagine she was going to be too upset, but I was still disappointed in myself, and it kind of brought me back to reality. I'd just have to tell her what happened, and I could only hope that she would understand. There was really no time to dwell on it, so I just threw everything in the car, and I headed back down the path that had led me to the car, only this time I was walking a little slower. Where I rounded the corner and I ended up where I had met Matt in the first place, I glanced over and I saw my reflection in the glass, and it occurred to me that I had just met the band while wearing the suit. That really hadn't occurred to me until I was looking at myself, but it just really didn't matter. I had the priceless memories of hanging out with the guys, and then the most incredible, tangible souvenir that I could have walked away from this tour with, the black ticket banner. There was absolutely no way, zero chance that this final show could offer anything greater to commemorate where that glorious road had taken me. So I took one last drag off my cigarette. I put the butt in the ashtray that was right next to the door. I tapped on the glass for the CID lady to let me in. She was waiting. She let me right in. And as I passed through the door, I entered the Twilight Zone. I say this because of what I just stated about things not possibly being able to get any better. When I said that, I meant that. But I was about to find out that I couldn't have been more wrong. I was so wrong. Based on what Matt had said, I had a little under 10 minutes to locate the soundboard so I could make it into the group picture. And luckily for me, the first corridor I entered led me right to where I needed to be. I flashed in my wristband and I walked on into that old familiar feeling of laying eyes on a venue for the first time. When I got in there, I just kind of looked around. I had made it, number 35, and all that remained was the show itself. The Van Andel Arena was a nice one, as they all had been, and as soon as I looked around, I realized that it felt a little smaller than the rest of them. There were 11,690 tickets available and 11,690 tickets sold, making it yet another sold-out show. The floor was packed and the upper levels were starting to fill in when I got in there. Jim and Joe had already started their show. They were getting the crowd fired up. Something that I should have noticed right away but didn't, Jim was doing his show in a New York Yankees outfit. That should have caught my eye immediately because I know what a huge Mets fan that Jim is. And also, I've been a New York Yankees fan my entire life, but it didn't catch my eye immediately. I found out a little later. I was really in a daze, but I did know if I didn't get to the soundboard, I was going to miss the picture. Normally, when you heard of group pictures being taken, you'd do whatever you could to get to them. But if you missed one, it was really no big deal. But this was going to be one picture that I was going to regret not being in if I missed the chance. I just about missed it. Right when I got there, Metallica's cameraman was lining up his focus on a large group of people in suits and dresses. It was quite a sight to behold, but I didn't have time to behold it. I jumped in the back with that smile that had been fixed on my face since Matt had put the wristband on and given me the news earlier that day. He took a few shots and it was history, although none of us has ever seen where that picture ended up. We all assume that it'll surface someday. It's just a matter of when and where, and when that day comes, there are going to be quite a few black ticket holders that are pretty happy about it. As soon as that was over, quite a few people came up to me and asked how the meet and greet went. Every time someone asked, I pretty much gave them the same answer. I told them it was great. I told them how I got to hang out with all of them in a group. And yes, I did. I was able to give them each a black ticket roamer patch. That seemed to be the burning question. The smiles on the news of the great encounter mean more to me than I can tell you. There were so many people there that were very, very happy for me. I got to say hey to quite a few people that I hadn't had the opportunity to see that day. And I got to meet quite a few new people that I had never met before. I got to meet black ticket holder Keith Good's brother. I was heading out to get water or beer or something to drink, and he joined me. We got to have a pretty good conversation that I'll spare you the details of while we were waiting to get our beers. Then we made it back in and back to the soundboard. When we got there, I got to talk to quite a few more people while I was scanning around the rail to see where Michelle and Svet had landed. I finally located them, but unfortunately to make it to them, I was going to have to go all the way around the stage through the crowd, and that was going to be quite a chore. They had already put the chute where the band enters the stage, and that's the rails, so I couldn't just cut that way. I had to take the long way home. I wanted to make sure I got to speak to him before the show. I was kind of hoping that I wasn't going to walk away with a black eye when I told Michelle that I had forgotten to get her black ticket signed, but I wanted to touch base with him before the show, and I knew that the time was, it was coming. I didn't have a heck of a lot of time, so I decided if I was going to go, I had to go now, and that's what I did. I started making my way through the crowd and around the stage. As I was making it through the crowd, I could already picture Svet telling me that he was going to make room for me on the rail, or, if there was no room, he was going to offer me his spot. He had done that more than once. There was really no need for it, but I could just see it happening, and that's what I was thinking when I was walking through the crowd. Everything else was just kind of like a blur. When I got there, I kind of reached in, and I had a guy that was a couple behind him get their attention. When they turned around, Svet was giving me that come here gesture that I kind of gotten used to seeing at shows. I was kind of leaning in on the guy that had gotten their attention. I apologized. I told him I wasn't trying to get up to the rail. I just wanted to, give him a quick message. I leaned in and I kind of yelled. I said, no, I'm not coming up. I just wanted to let you guys know that I made it. And everything went great. I gave him the thumbs up. And right then I heard, Mike, where have you been? And I turned around and it was Jason Garkowski. He said, why aren't you answering your phone? Come on, they want you, hurry. And he kind of pulled me out of the crowd. I wasn't really sure what the hell was going on. All I could really think was that I was going to get to go about halfway backstage, as groups of 3 and 4 people had done throughout the tour. You get to watch the band do their little pre-show huddle and then watch them enter. That's about the only thing I could think of that could possibly be happening. Jason stayed on me. He continually kept trying to rush me. Come on, man, come on. I was kind of shuffling through the crowd, not a care in the world. I really thought that's where we were headed. And I just told myself it won't be the end of the world. After all, I had just, I just hung out with them. So it wouldn't be the end of the world if I missed the huddle. I just couldn't make myself run. We were about 3/4 of the way around the stage, nearing the soundboard, and Val came running up and she grabbed my hand and she just drugged me. She got me moving through that crowd quite a bit faster than Jason had been able to. I kind of felt like a little kid, and all of a sudden she thrust me forward, and there I was. Jim Brewer was in my face. There were a couple spotlights on me. I didn't know what was going on. I looked to my immediate left, and I was staring at John Cooper, and I said, what the fuck is going on? And he said, never mind, just roll with it. So here's a clip of what actually happened at that point, and after the clip, I'll tell you a little bit more about it.
All these black ticket holders, right here, it's a special pic signed by every crazy Metallica fan that has took this journey with you in the whole way. And we thank you for seeing your amazing face, Metallica face, every single part of America. Give them a big round of applause. Every single show.
And just so you all know, Mike doesn't fly to shows, he's driven to every single show by himself, taking other Metallica fans there. This is a true Metallica fan. This is what the family is about, right fucking here.
And check this out. He's recorded the whole journey, and you can see this journey. Tell all these Metallica fans that everywhere they can watch all your videos of this entire Metallica tour.
YouTube?
YouTube? Do you have your own channel, like where they can watch it?
All one word.
There you go.
You know what, Jim Brewer's going to tweet out where you can check out all of Mike's videos. One more time for our buddy Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Congratulations. Where's my Injustice for All fans? I'm going to play a little medley from Injustice for All. I want you to listen closely. And I'm going to ask you how many of these songs are from Injustice for All.
So that's what happened to me as part of Jim and Joe's last show in Grand Rapids. As you can tell, I really didn't know what was going on. When he asked me where can we see your videos, my answer was YouTube. Before he asked me in front of everyone, he kind of covered the mic while Joe was talking, and he leaned in and he asked me, where can we see your videos? I thought I understood the question. You know, when he had the mic covered, I thought I understood it enough to answer when he didn't have the mic covered. I planned on saying, YouTube, search up MetfanMike, all one word. But when he asked me the question, I said YouTube, and as soon as I heard my voice, I froze up. He pulled back and there was some laughter as if I had intentionally said YouTube as my answer, the joke being, no shit, any video you see is going to be on YouTube. But I froze up when I could hear my own voice echoing when I said YouTube. I stopped dead. I was completely frozen. The combination of hearing my own voice with the spotlights on me, I was not in a good way in that moment. And when he came back, I don't think he could see it, but I looked right at him and I said, I can't hear anything. What I meant to say was, I can't think straight, but I can't hear anything is what came out. And really not sure, you know, the tricks of the mind in a moment like that. He came back and this time I got it all out. YouTube, MetfanMike, all one word. And that got me off the hook. It was over as quickly as it had started. I couldn't believe what had just happened in front of all those people. I had friends coming up to me saying that was hilarious. And then I told them that was not intentional. But by that point, none of it mattered. All I knew is that I was holding the greatest addition to my collection that I could possibly be holding. I could never, not in a million years, have ever imagined something like that happening. There really are no words to describe how I felt that night and feel about it to this day. After that happened and I turned around facing the stage, just kind of standing there trying to figure it all out, what just happened, I remember looking up to my left, way up, all the way up, right about the place that my, you know, where Jim was, where we were standing, if that was the stage, up to my left is where my seats were for my very first Metallica concert. It was really impossible to wrap my head around the entirety of it all. But a memory from that very first show is like the first thing that went through my mind. So take a look at this thing. It's absolutely incredible. It's obviously a giant guitar pick. Our friend Dustin Stroll, who was one of the Canadian black ticket holders, ordered this from our friend Tiago in Portugal. He made quite a reputation of making these giant guitar picks. I'm not sure if he still does it, but his work is incredible. It's got the MetfanMike logo on one side, and on the other side, it's got the, I don't know if you can see it, it's got the outline of the United States under all those signatures. That's, the outline shows all the states that Metallica played in on this black ticket run. And it says, by myself but not alone, to commemorate the series. And then, as you see, it's signed by many people on both sides. Most of these people are black ticket holders. There are a few that weren't. That didn't really matter. This, though, is basically a gift from the black ticket holders to me. And this means more to me than I can tell you. And I want to say something else about this while I'm holding it. As soon as I got it, I had people coming up to me during the show saying, I didn't get to sign that. You know, can we find a marker? Can I sign it? Quite a few people seemed slightly distraught that they didn't have the opportunity to sign it. They really wish they could have. Several of them were actually trying to track down a Sharpie there that night to no avail. I also got several messages from people over the next couple days with the same concern. So I figured now is a good time to say this while I have it out. If you had a black ticket, you're on here. Trust me, you're on here. Whether your signature's on here or not, you're here. If I dealt with you in any regard along this adventure, you're on here. I'll take it one step further and say if I've ever dealt with you in any regard about this band at any time, you're on here. I don't mean to insult in any way the gift that the black ticket holders gave me to celebrate and commemorate our time together. But honestly, without the previous 32, 33 years as a fan, we wouldn't be here. It wouldn't have happened. So I regard this as a symbol of lifetime achievement as a Metallica fan. And it means the world to me. It means more than anything in my Metallica collection. So I ran over to the bank and I got my safe deposit box to pull out the best comparative example I can offer in regard to what that pick means to me. This is the Megaforce HRM Kill 'Em All test pressing. This is where it all began. And considered by most, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to. This is considered by most to be the holy grail of Metallica vinyl collecting. I'm going to put it back, sit tight. I shouldn't have taken that out probably, but I had to. You don't get to see them very often. As I just said, considered by many to be the holy grail of Metallica record collecting, vinyl collecting. In my opinion, I honestly believe that it's going to show itself to be at some point in the future the holy grail of all modern records. That's just my opinion. It's a very strong opinion. Only time will tell. The point I'm trying to make here, that is, if someone put a gun to my head and they said you got to give one of these two items up, and I mean this, I'd have to tell them, take the record. Nobody's getting this. This gift means more to me than any material thing that I possess. And I just want to say thank you to anyone who has been any part of the adventure that led to this. So shortly after all that went down, Jim and Joe said goodnight with It's a Long Way to the Top by AC/DC, followed by those glorious angels singing. Metallica hit the stage for the 35th time on our black ticket adventure, and it was on. As I heard those opening notes to Hardwired, I could just feel the energy like the place was about to explode. A very calm, relaxing feeling took over me. I was floating. I was on cloud 9. I felt something that I had never felt my entire life. I had finally finished something, and I finished it in the suit. I finished well. It just felt so good to have completed something. I just can't tell you what that felt like. I spent a good deal of time hanging out with friends back at the soundboard. I was kind of walking around, interacting with as many people as I possibly could. And then at some point, I did what had become my customary way of handling the shows. I just kind of wandered off and walked around, and I tried to view the show from as many vantage points as possible. I ran into my friend Jeff right away, and he immediately started laughing over the whole YouTube thing. He said, "Don't worry, I've got it all on tape. We can watch it over and over." I told him I was going to go roaming around the arena. I asked him if he wanted to come along. He said, "Nah, just do your thing. I'll be right here when you get back. Congrats, man. Good job." I walked away. I spent a lot of time just looking up into the seats, watching the crowd, watch the greatest band on earth. I made it all the way around to the other side where Michelle and Svet were, and then I just kind of slowly walked back. And as I did that, I just had my eyes on the rail, and I saw so many people. It felt like I knew everyone all the way around the rail. I'm sure I didn't know them all, but it just felt that way. There were so many people in that crowd that I had gotten to know over the previous 6 months, and I felt that feeling of togetherness more in Grand Rapids than I had at any other point along the way. And that kind of makes sense. It was the last show. If I knew anything during that walk around, I knew, once again, I'm going to just keep saying this, how happy I was. I just felt really good that night. When I made it most of the way back to the soundboard, I stopped, I saw Jeff again, and I just kind of stood there. And I waited until he turned. He kind of jumped. He laughed. He said, "Boy, you did it. You did it." He was so excited for me. And we normally don't get that excited for each other. We spend a lot of time, doing the opposite. And that's just how we roll. But he was really excited. And, I sat there and watched a couple songs with him. That felt good. I thought quite a bit about the first show that we had seen. He had completed his Hardwired bookends. So it was fun to watch a couple songs with him. I finally took off. I headed back to the soundboard. We finished the tour together in the most appropriate way. We listened to Nothing Else Matters and Sandman. Then we watched the band give their final farewell of the 2018-2019 North American leg of their WorldWired tour. Some of the lights came on. It was over. We had made it. It was pick time. I didn't even try to get any picks. I knew that I was holding in my hands the only pick that really mattered. I, of course, did need my 2 picks for Alexander and Jonathan. I was pretty certain that I wasn't going to have any problems getting a couple of those in the upcoming days, but it actually started almost immediately once the lights were fully on and people were heading for the door. As we were on our way out, numerous people hit me instantly and asked me if I got my picks. Some of them just came up and handed them to me without asking first if I needed them. This continued all the way to the hall. By the time I made it into the hall, I had a good handful of Grand Rapids picks. I'd like to say thanks to anyone who handed me picks that night or anywhere along the way for that matter. While we're talking about picks, I'm going to go ahead and give the final pick update of my goal, my pursuit of 2 per show. With the help of many of my friends, I'm happy to say that I was able to get, this looks like a mess, they're in clear plastic sheets. I was able to get 2 per show, city picks, the face picks from each year, the album cover picks from each year. It took a lot of help from a lot of friends, but I was able to accomplish that. Alexander and Jonathan, these picks now belong to you. I was hoping to have them framed up by now, but you know I'm a little slow. Next time I see you guys, I'm going to hand you these. They're going to be yours forever. And for the record, Alexander and Jonathan, I remember when this all began, I remember telling you guys that I really wish that you could have come along on the entire trip, the entire tour. Well, I hope you know that you did come along. You were with me every step of the way. So next time I see you, here come your picks. I was pretty certain there was going to be a group photo after the show, but I hadn't really heard any details. I did hear somebody mention out front of the building, but when we got into the hall, something really cool happened. It was the first time I saw this happen on the tour. It's what I'll call a flash group photo that occurred. The hall was just packed from side to side. I don't know how many people deep, but there were just hundreds of people there. A lot of the black ticket holders were out there, and the movement just stopped. We heard the arena workers yelling. I mean, they were going nuts yelling, but there were just so many people. Nobody really seemed to listen to them. And we all put on our smiles and did our thing. Joe Pasella was up front where he always was, taking the group photo. And that turned out to be the best group photo that I saw throughout the entire tour. It was just massive. When we got outside, another group photo seemed to be forming, and that was really cool because there was nobody yelling at us to move it along, and we kind of just took our time, and we got another very large group photo. Then I heard a voice coming from behind me, Mike, we've got to do my interview. And I knew who it was when I heard that. I turned around, and it was our Canadian friend, Brandon Spears. He had said more than once he'd be happy to do one of my fan interviews, but he wanted to wait till the last show. I was so exhausted. I was just like, oh my God, and I tried to talk him out of it, but he was persistent, and I'm really glad that he was. I was just so tired, but I said, hell with it, let's just do it. He wasn't going to let me go. But I appreciate that, Brandon. I didn't mean to be so hesitant, but anyway, I'm just going to show you what happened. It was, like I said, it was really short. This is officially the last fan interview that I did for the series on the 2018-2019 Hardwired Black Ticket Experience. All right, who are you and where are you from?
Brandon Spears from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
All righty, how long have you been a Metallica fan?
Probably about 20 years, since early high school.
Okay, have you seen them before live?
I have seen them 53 times.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Can you narrow it down to a favorite song?
My favorite song, I always say Fade to Black is the best song overall that's ever been written, but I think my personal favorite is The Outlaw Torn. Yeah.
Love the Load era myself. Favorite album?
Probably Justice.
Nice. How about favorite band member, past or present?
Lars, because I've kind of become friendly with him over the years, and he's just the nicest guy, and he inspired me to play drums.
That's excellent. Yeah, that was cool watching you two interact the other night when you jumped the rail. That was cool. What do you think about Brewer? What's your opinion on what Jim Brewer did here?
It was great. I love music, but I've seen so many tours and sitting through hundreds of opening bands, it gets tiring after months and months. It was a nice, refreshing change, and he's a really down-to-earth guy and became friends with all of us too, and it was amazing, honestly.
Yeah, he's metalhead. We come from all walks of life as Metallica fans. Do you mind if I ask what you do for a living?
Sorry?
Do you mind if I ask what you do for a living?
Of course, yeah. So I've done a whole bunch of things. I've done some personal training, and currently I work for a produce company, and we sell fruit and vegetables. We import it, and we supply chefs, and get to work in the food industry, get a lot of free food, meet a lot of cool chefs.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really fun.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
final question, and I'll leave you
You can ask
alone.
as many questions as you want.
Well, I
I'll do
pretty much
anything-
have a standard
I'll do
thing.
anything for the Metallica family.
No, dude, I appreciate that, and I'm not trying to run you off. My battery is starting to dip.
worries. Yeah.
But no, this was a standard battery of questions we asked. But
Okay.
if the band members themselves should happen to see this, do you have a personal message for them?
Just thank you for the friendships you've created, for the memories. Whenever we finish a tour, I don't know if we're going to see them again in 1 week, 1 year, 10 years. And it's really sad, but they leave us with such amazing memories and such amazing experiences and such amazing friends. And it's you guys are inspiring musicians as people. You know, sometimes rock stars get a bad rap, but I've met you guys, and you guys are fucking incredible, and you touch so many people, and it makes me want to cry. We all love you so much.
After the interview, Brandon and I made it back to the group. It seemed like a never-ending goodbye. There were just so many people that were trying to, bid each other fond farewells. And my friend Steven Soltz, he was standing over near me. I saw him over there, but people just kept coming up and coming up. When I finally got to speak to him, he told me that he had brought his guitar pick collection that we had been talking about throughout the entire tour. He works in a concert venue, and he's gotten the opportunity to meet quite a few famous people. He really doesn't have pictures and autographs. They're not supposed to bug him, but he has ended up with quite a guitar pick collection. I was just so beat that I had to apologize and tell him I wasn't going to be able to go to his hotel and check out the guitar pick collection. And I hoped sometime in the future we'd be able to get back to that. We were even skipping the final post party that was nearby. He completely understood. He said, we'll definitely deal with that down the line. But the reason I'm telling you this is when I first met Steven, he told me what he did, and I was pretty interested in what he does for a living. And, he started rattling off some of the shows he's been in attendance. I mean, he worked for the venue, but he still got to see a lot of shows. When he started telling me the details of some of the famous people he's met, and then some of the guitar picks he's acquired, it was just really cool, so I just kept asking questions. Of all musical acts, Air Supply came up. We were outside, hanging out outside of a Metallica show talking about Air Supply. He kind of laughed at how excited I got, and I said, well, I explained that I was just too young. I was the wrong age. I was too young at the wrong point in time, and due to that combination, from that age until now, I've always liked Air Supply. He thought that was a really funny way to look at it, and then we didn't say much more. The next time we saw each other, I said, hey, you're the guy that worked the Air Supply show. And he kind of just looked at me funny, and he laughed at me, and we just kind of went on about our business. And then again, the next time I saw him after that, as soon as I saw him from a distance, I said, hey, Air Supply guy. And he kind of looked up at me, and he gave me this look like, this guy's nuts. And, he laughed. You get the picture of how this all evolved. So here we were at the last show. He reached his hand in his pocket and he said, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'm 100% sure you're going to appreciate owning this a little more than I am. And he handed me an Air Supply pick. This was just another moment where there's just no way possible that I could have seen that coming. And it's another moment where I can't hold the pick up and show it to you. I did not lose it. It's in a safe place. I just, due to my chaotic existence, I can't quite remember where I put my Air Supply pick, but I do have one. Steven, I said it that night, and I mean it to this day. That Air Supply pick means as much to me as any Metallica pick that I got on the entire tour. Well, for one thing, it's an Air Supply pick. How cool is that? But even greater than that, it's symbolic of the random things that happen due to our interactions. When we go down that road and do the things we do, when we live, the unseen greatness in our random interactions and the things that those interactions lead to. That Air Supply pick is yet another gift of the Black Ticket. Steven and I have had our fair share of wild times since that, but as that night goes, Steven, thank you. We said our final goodbyes to those outside the arena and we headed back for the hotel. On the trip there, I explained to Michelle my dilemma of not getting her Black Ticket signed. She didn't seem too mad or upset or whatever. I still felt disappointed, but Michelle, if she was mad, she hid it well. It didn't take long to get back to the hotel. We were happy to get out of our fancy clothes. Svet and I wasted no time getting on that Jack Daniels that we had purchased the day before for our final drink. And when the bottle was empty, Svet said I needed a Black Ticket trophy. So he wrote that on there, end of the line Black Ticket trophy. Svetty, he dated it on the front. He wrote Grand Rapids, Michigan. And this is one I'm never going to throw away. I don't know if you can see that, but this is, really cool thing for me to have. I appreciate the thought that you put into that, Svet. I would have imagined that it would have probably taken a little longer for me to get to sleep that night, but I don't even remember my head hitting the pillow after Dr. Svet dosed me with his medicine.
The next morning we woke up earlier than I thought we would have. We put on our regular clothes and that felt better than I can tell you. When we checked our phones, we saw that several people had texted us telling us that there was going to be one final get-together and we were more than welcome to come. It was going to be at the Denny's halfway to the airport. We decided that's what we wanted to do. It would be a good opportunity to say goodbye to a lot of our friends. So we got our stuff packed up. We loaded the car, we checked out, and we headed to Denny's. The only problem was Svet had an early flight, and we did have time to swing in and let him say goodbye to a few people, but everyone hadn't arrived by the time we got there the first time, so he said a few goodbyes. We took him to the airport, dumped him off, said goodbye, and we headed back to Denny's. By the time we made it back, the group size had gotten considerably larger, and they had everybody in the party room in the back of the restaurant. When we got settled, I kind of just looked around the room, and it was a large group, but I was happy to know. I realized that I knew every person in there. Joe Pasella was there, Pete and Sarah were there, the Vikings of Norway were there, the Swedes were there for a little while, but Eric came in and had to rush them out. They had a flight change or something, so they were there for a little while. Val, Jason, and Brandon were there. Aaron Ginther was there. John Bidwell met us there, and I asked him if he wanted to ride with us. I told him I was going to take Michelle home, which was the west side of Chicago, and he lives in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, which is just a couple hours above Chicago. So I said, I really don't mind just running you home. He said he couldn't miss the opportunity to cap the tour off with one final little mini road trip, so he happily agreed. I just rattled off a whole lot of names, and I could continue to add to it. But in the process of doing that, I would still inevitably forget people. It's really why I hate shouting out names. And the reason I forget people is that MetFam is so vast. The point I was trying to get to when I started calling out names was that this was a solid group of die-hard Metallica fans that had just been through one hell of a ride together. And when I say die-hard fans, I'm not just talking about die-hard fans of a band. I'm talking about die-hard fans of this subculture. Die-hard fans of how we roll and what we do when we get together. Die-hard fans of that road that brings us together and magically unites us to celebrate each other and the music that bonds us. And the most notably wonderful thing about it is that there are hundreds and hundreds, even thousands more people like this that we know. Good friends, and then there's their friends who, until your paths cross, you're strangers, but you leave as friends. There were so many people out there that if circumstances would have been different and they would have ended up where we were sitting in that moment, the same thing would have happened. That common vibe of friendship would have been felt. That old MetFam connection is ever increasing. I quoted Robert Frost earlier, and I'll say it again right now. Nothing gold can stay. Everyone knew it was almost over, but nobody really cried. I had been waiting all along for that final ending. At that breakfast, something hit me. The more times you say goodbye to the same person, the easier it gets. And what I really mean by that is, in order to say goodbye repeatedly to the same person, you obviously have to encounter them over and over again. So you start to realize that this is more than just a person, it's become a good friend. This is a very old concept, but it becomes less of a goodbye and more of an until we meet again. We'd all be scattering in the various directions that we'd come from, but it wouldn't be long and we'd all be right back at it doing this very same thing again. In different cities, different states, different countries. The combinations of people are different every single time. But this subculture continues to expand and flourish everywhere this band goes, and it's really something special to be a part of. We decided to get a final group photo before we headed our own ways, so I took out the black ticket banner and we took one for the scrapbooks. We said our final goodbyes, we jumped in the car and we hit the road. Destination, Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Most of that ride was quiet and peaceful. We all just kind of watched the world go by. But then John got to experience the entertainment that several others had throughout the tour. Michelle and I going back and forth. When we got about a half hour outside of Chicago, I asked Michelle if she wanted me to drop her off at her dad's house. She said, "Now that's a brilliant idea, Einstein. How'd you come up with that? Drop me off where my car is?" I was pretty sure she would say something like that, and I was ready for it, so it didn't really hurt my feelings. It really didn't sting as bad as she would have liked it to, but I simply told her that I wasn't ready for it to end. I said, I'm just going to keep on driving for a little while. She told me she had a doctor's appointment or else she might consider it. And I said, well, that gives us somewhere to go. We'll take John, drop him off, and then we'll go get a hotel in the same town wherever your doctor's appointment is, and We'll take you to the doctor and then we'll roll on, see what happens after that. She told me I was nuts, but the funny thing is that's about all it took to get her on board. Then we decided that the perfect place to close out our adventure would be to revisit where it had all started, the Kohl Center in Madison, Wisconsin. And that was right on the way to John's house, so it wouldn't be much of a detour at all. Everyone agreed, and that's where we headed. Unfortunately, when we got there, there was some kind of Boy Scout convention or a little kids sport convention or, whatever it was. I'm pretty sure it was a Boy Scout convention, all the uniforms I saw. But the number of little kids running all over the place made it for insane driving. So in the best interest of all the little pedestrians' well-being, we decided to run for the hills. It would not have been an easy task to actually stop and get a picture. And I still regret not putting in that effort, but at least we got to see the place where it all began. We had a little over 100 miles to John's house, and that took a little under 2 hours. He was happy to be home. We dropped him off. And then we headed to whatever, I don't remember the little town where Michelle's doctor appointment was, but we found a hotel in that town and it just didn't take us that long. The next morning I took Michelle to her doctor's appointment. I sat in the car and waited for her. When she came out, I gave her two options. I had been thinking about it. I said, I can take you to your car now, or we could just keep on driving. She told me I was nuts again. I said, well, it's Friday. I don't have to be to work till Monday. She asked where we'd be heading if she decided to stay with me. I said, well, we just saw the Kohl Center, so the obvious stop would be to run to Minneapolis and see the Target Center. She just shook her head, took out her phone, and checked the radar, and it looked like there was a big storm coming. We could get caught up in some crazy weather. So when we saw that, I asked her if she'd ever been to Delavan. Delavan is the little town where Alexander, Jonathan, and I stayed on our trip to Milwaukee for the Milwaukee show. It was such a cool town. I planned on returning, but I didn't think it would be that soon. She agreed, and that's where we headed. We got lost a couple times, so by the time we made it to Delavan, the sun was going down. I was happy that we were able to get a room in the same hotel that Jonathan, Alexander, and I had stayed when we did our little Milwaukee road trip. And we're still convinced to this day that that hotel is haunted, and Michelle did not argue after staying there herself one night. So I think we're all in agreement. The next morning we got up, we spent half the day in thrift stores. It had been a while, so we got our fix there. We spent a good deal of time driving around the town locating the murals that Alexander, Jonathan, and I hadn't had the time to see. You know, the whole town's covered in murals, and I got to see quite a few more on this trip. When we finally agreed that we had probably seen all the murals in Delavan that there are to see, we hit the highway, and about an hour later, we found ourselves at a rest area. I was sitting on the picnic table having a smoke. Michelle was over playing in the rocks like she always did. She must have found a couple good ones because she popped up. She just walked over, stared at me for a minute, and said, "Don't you think it's time to go home?" I kind of smiled, and I said, I know it's time to go home, but I just can't. I don't want to. This has been the greatest adventure of my life, and I just don't want it to end. She said, "You don't have to convince me. I already know. I get it. And if you want to keep on driving, I'll go with you. But I really think you ought to get your ass home, rest up, get back to work, pay off your credit card so you can get back out on that road, because it's always going to be there. That's the best part. The road is always going to be there. You've got nothing to worry about." All that, and my dad's been blowing up my phone. He knows the concert was Wednesday, and I think he's getting pretty worried. I don't want him to think I ran off with some crazy guy. I had to laugh at the way she said it, but I finally agreed. We got in the car, and we headed to her dad's house. And in about 2 hours, we pulled into the driveway. I got to meet Mr. Chacho, and that was a pretty awesome experience. I had heard so much about him, and he turned out to be exactly what I had pictured. He's since passed away, but I'm just happy that I had the pleasure of meeting him. He was quite a character. We said our goodbyes, and I was on my own. I was back to by myself, but not alone. If I did things right, I could be home in 5 hours, but I rarely do things right. I didn't make a wrong turn. I made no turn. I just kept going straight, and I ended up, before I knew it, I was back in Indiana. I tried to convince myself that I could figure out how to get home because I'd been to Indiana quite a few times, but the further I drove, the more lost I felt, and I eventually gave in, and I plugged in my phone so Google lady could take me home promptly. We had Michelle's phone hooked up the whole time we were running around, so I never even thought to plug mine in, but I broke it out and plugged it in, had the path, realized I was still quite a ways from home, but I kept on going. When I had about 100 miles left in my trip, I realized if I kept driving, I was more than likely going to fall asleep at the wheel, and I didn't want that, so I pulled into a rest area, and I slept a few hours. When I woke up, I looked at the clock, and I noticed that I had gotten more sleep than I had planned on getting when I pulled in, and that wasn't a bad thing. I felt pretty good, But I felt even better when I remembered my emergency can of Monster Energy drink that I kept stashed in the trunk. I got out of the car to stretch a little bit. I grabbed the Monster and I headed over to a picnic table to think things over while I waited to wake up. I lit up a smoke. I stared at the sky. The sun was about to come up, and while I was waiting for my Monster to kick in, I found myself drifting to that old familiar place where I like to wrap my head around things. Now, I'd imagine you, if you've been watching the series, you're probably getting tired of me using that term. Wrap my head around things, wrap my head around this, wrap my head around that. I use that term quite a bit, but it's really the most appropriate term to use in most cases when I use it. Anyway, I sat there thinking about the entirety of where I'd been. There was just so much to consider, and while I was sitting there, a conversation that I had with our friend Michelle Olsen in Kansas City popped into my head. Now, any of you that know Michelle know that she is the epitome of positive mindset. She has an aura about her, and it's just really nice to talk to her. She's so enthusiastic about life in general, and it becomes quite contagious. And if you've ever talked to her, you know what I'm talking about. I was talking to her at the show in Kansas City during Jim Brewer's set. We were over by the soundboard, and our conversation got really interesting really quick. We were kind of going back and forth about the best way to describe what we were in the midst of in our black ticket experience. We were talking about the massive amount of energy involved in what was going on around us. We talked about the characteristics of exactly what this black ticket experience was, and we agreed that it was really hard to explain it to friends who weren't a part of it. At some point in there, our considerations went from the what to the why. I can't remember exactly how she phrased it, but she was kind of searching for the underpinnings of it all. You know, what makes this happen? And I just that's what threw me off the rails. And I said, well, honestly, I think it's pretty simple. We can overthink it all day long, and I've been doing that for a long time. But it's pretty simple. It's the perfect example of tribalism. People innately crave the company of other people. And what they crave the most is the company of people like themselves. And there are a few outliers. I've known people in my life, they just don't like people. They don't want anything to do with people, and they're perfectly happy. So there are some outliers. But for the most part, we wish to be around those like us. And that's what we have going on here. We were standing by the soundboard, I think, and we kind of wandered away from the crowd, and we were having our little conversation. But again, I continued that if, for example, if the New York Yankees would have come up with this idea that we're experiencing, but they called it the pinstripe pass, and they said that, 250 lucky fans, if you get a pinstripe pass, it allows you access to every away game that you make it to. The same types of interactions would occur among the people who had the pinstripe pass. The same types of friendships would form, the bonding, the same level it would occur in that venue. And if NASCAR, for example, the pit pass, there's probably something already called a pit pass, but if they came out with the pit pass and it got you access to every race you made it to, the same type of interactions would occur, leading to friendships and just an overall bonding of the group. But remove it from sports. Take it to, I'm thinking of someone like my mother, Catholic prayer ladies. And you give them a pass that's called the Cathedral Crew. They're a member of the Cathedral Crew. And this group of people, they get tours of cathedrals in different areas. I don't know how the seasons would work in that example, but the same types of interaction would occur. Like-minded people seem to bond. I think you get what I'm suggesting. And fortunately for us, Metallica came up with this brilliant idea, and we're Metallica fans. So here we are. But in all reality, this has been less about the Metallica experience and more about the human experience. And when I got to that point, Michelle took a deep breath and said, it is the human experience. And hearing her say that made me feel not so crazy, because we were getting some funny looks from Michelle's brother and Mr. Overshaw. They were standing there looking at us like, what are they talking about? I glanced over a time or two and saw that. So back to the rest area, I was sitting there having my smoke thinking about that. Michelle, if you're watching, I want to tell you, that conversation, I've referred to that conversation in my mind more than once, and every time I do, I smile. And I don't know if you remember that or not. Something tells me you probably remember that, but I enjoyed our conversation that day. Right there as the sun was coming up that morning, I felt satisfied in my need to wrap my head around these things. That did it for me in that moment. I wasn't going to think any more about it. It wasn't going to drive me crazy on the ride home and probably get me lost again. I had about 100 miles to go. I had to get gas one more time, so it ended up taking a little over 2 hours, but it was a very smooth,
peaceful ride. I wasn't racking my brain trying to figure anything out. No need for further contemplation. As I made the final turn on the street I live on, I could see the house in the distance. I felt a sense of relief. When I turned the car off, there was no need to do as I had done on the 4 previous legs because I took care of that at the rest area. So I didn't sit there thinking about everything that had happened. I got out. As I was walking to the door, little thoughts ran through my mind. I had driven 27,000 miles. I had gone coast to coast, border to border, into Canada. 35 cities in 25 states and 2 Canadian territories. I had made hundreds and hundreds of new friends, really good friends, met thousands of people. I had met right at 200 of the 250 black ticket holders, so 80%, I'd say that was a success. By this point, I hit the door. I stopped thinking about any of it. I went on in, I crashed, I slept long, I slept hard. I woke up the next morning with realization that my life was forever changed. I now possessed the memories of the greatest adventure that I could have ever hoped to imagine. This adventure, when viewed as a whole, the priceless gift given to me by my black ticket. So that's a wrap. That's it. The never-ending series is finally over. The only thing left would be some thank yous, and I'll try to make this as quick and painless as possible, but you never know. I want to start off by saying thank you for all the gifts I received from other people along this tour. I had no idea it was coming, but the gifts just kept coming. They started in Wisconsin. Madison, Jeff, my friend Jeff bought me this hat, or he bought him this hat. He bought himself the hat and the shirt. And then when I loaded up and I headed off to Minnesota, he gave them to me. He told me to wear the hat to every show. So Jeff, it made it. Thanks for the hat. Thanks for the shirt. My original plan was to re-show all these things and, thank everyone one by one. But that's going to take some time, and that's already been done. If you're interested in seeing these things and you haven't checked out the first 34 episodes, they're in there. You just have to find them. But I'm talking the string art. Ryan in Altoona, Pennsylvania, he had a cool little piece of string art there, and he sent it to me during the tour. The wood carving that my friend Matt Traumer gave me in Indianapolis. The chocolate that came from South America. Ephra gave it to me in Cincinnati. The Iron Maiden poster from my friend Wally in Texas. Chapter shirts from John Bidwell and Chad Walswick. And the list goes on and on. I just want to give a sincere thank you to every person that brought me something from their world and gave it to me as a gift along this tour. Thank you so much for the thought. The thought itself is the gift, but then you have the tangible gift as well. So thank you for all that consideration. Every one of you, you know who you are. I'd also like to thank all the people that helped me in the pick chase. Getting my picks for Alexander and Jonathan, that was a real goal that I set at the beginning of the tour. It wasn't just something cool I was trying to do. I made it a goal. It was accomplished, and it would have not been accomplished without the help of many people. So I think you know who you are too. I'd like to say thanks to everyone who helped me with that, and then the people that attempted to help me. Quite often people would ask me. I had a dozen people at every show making sure I got my pick, and my 2 picks. And if I had them, I thank you, but no thank you. Thanks, good looking out. I want to say thank you to everyone that helped me in any way, shape, or form achieve that goal. Most importantly, what I feel like I owe to so many people is thank you to those of you who gave me the gift of your time. So many people gave me their time in participation of my projects. And then you have, take the project out of it. If you just shared time with me, thank you for the interaction. I met so many cool people along that road. Time is truly a priceless gift, and I want to say thank you to anyone who shared some of theirs with me. And the guys, I can't forget the guys, James, Kirk, Lars, Rob. You guys gave me the greatest gift you could have ever given me. My black ticket and all that it encompasses. Thank you so much for that. And on a little larger scale, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of anyone who's ever been a fan of this band at any point in time. Thank you for all you have done. You've changed the world for so many people. And on that note, I'd like to say something on behalf of the band, and I don't think they're going to mind me speaking on their behalf. The members of this band are simply that. They're guys in a band. Granted, it's a band that achieved heights that most people can only imagine. At the end of the day, there's still just 4 guys in a band. But if you want to see the heart and soul of Metallica, you're only going to find it in one place, and that's out in the crowd. They can't be who they are and do what they do without us being who we are, doing what we do. One hand washes the other, and together we are Metallica. So thank you. So that's about it. I hope you've enjoyed the series. I look forward to getting back to the Color Our World Blackened project. We're going to get that started as soon as I return from the next 5 weeks out on the road. And I do have one more little piece of this series. I guess I shouldn't be calling it complete without the black ticket introductions. We're going to be doing that. I think I'll call that episode 35.5. It's the black ticket introductions where you'll get to meet some of my friends. So I think that's all I've got. I'd like to say, as always, thank you for watching. If you like what we have going on here with the channel, we would appreciate it greatly if you consider subscribing. Give us a like, a dislike, whatever the case may be. Leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Next episode, 35.5, Black Ticket Introduction. We'll see you there. Until then, rock on. We did that shit, Met Fam.
Metallica loves Grand Rapids.